Welcome to Riders Up. I am Jim Gazzali, along with Michael Wilson, CEO of Forza Bloodstock, and Smoke Mike Rennie. Guys, thanks for joining me on this new endeavor into horse racing media.
Certainly an exciting endeavor. I mean, we kind of came up with this idea of having a show that really brings you guys the top level of the sport, inside information on what's going on in the sport, horses that are appearing that you need to keep an eye on, horses that are competing in the graded stakes and stakes level. And so we really want to bring you guys the top end of the sport as in-depth as possible.
Exactly. And we're going to give you the most current information on those top horses leading up to the races. So you don't have those gaps in between where you don't know where they're at. We're going to be following the top horses all over the industry year round, giving you current and up-to-date info on what's happening with them.
Yeah, so as we look forward to racing in 2023, the marquee event early on in the calendar year is always the Pegasus World Cup and the Pegasus Turf. So as we look forward to that, a lot of connections planning out that final prep race. So we'll see a bunch of graded stakes winners loading into the gate here in the next couple of weeks, prepping for Pegasus weekend. So as we look forward to that, a lot of the projected fields that we're seeing for the Pegasus World Cup so far seems pretty deep, right, guys?
Yeah, I mean, you've got quite a few horses looking to point there. Obviously, the two obvious standouts thus far are Cyberknife and White Abarrio. As these horses kind of shake out over the next month, it'll be interesting to see if something pops out of the San Antonio on the 26th at Santa Anita. I know Baffert's running a couple in there, which we're going to get to a little bit later in the show. But looking as things shape up, we've obviously lost a lot of the big shooters, Flightline, Life is Good. Those horses have been retired, but at least we've kept Cyberknife around. Taiba is still around, but I hear there's different plans going on with that horse, but definitely a deep field with, starting with Cyberknife and starting with White Abarrio and then going down the line as you have Simplification and others who are solid horses kind of throughout the 3-year-old year who are going to fill in that race.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. I was looking over it and seeing the 13 entries, Saffie, with 3 in there. I'm curious if maybe we'll pull one out. But you got like a horse like Papa Cap, it's kind of some random horses. I just don't think it has the class, but it showed some ability. Simplification to me, it just doesn't have it on this level. He's never even beat White Abarrio. And Cyberknife, I feel, is going to be very difficult to beat just out this list. But we know who I'm going to be rolling with, like always. White Abarrio's in it, my boy there. So hopefully he can battle back. Now, once again, faced a tough field last time out. I don't think anyone was beating the 7 there on this last race ever. But yeah, it looks like a great field of horses. At least it's deep. I like to see 13 horses already set up to possibly be in it, huh, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, you've got, but basically, and you said it, to me, at this stage, it's a 2-horse race. You've got Cyberknife, you've got White Abarrio. Cyberknife getting beat very narrowly in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. And then obviously White Abarrio running a huge race last out in the Cigar Mile. And then kind of them also saying, look, maybe the mile's not our distance. There was discussion of cutting him back a little bit and seeing if he really wanted the mile. He's undefeated at Gulfstream. He's won at the mile and 1/8 last year when he won the Florida Derby. The horse is obviously back into form off that last race. So looking at things as going forward, those are my 2 horses that I really am paying attention to in this spot, and we'll see. I mean, Saffie had another horse, and we're going to have an interview with him a little bit later in the show, talking to him about what he's got going on. But obviously that list has White Abarrio, O'Connor, who is an interesting horse that just popped up and won impressively recently, and Skippy, who's been, his second behind White Abarrio, has performed, won the West Virginia Derby, ran 3rd in the Belmont Stakes, and had a pretty solid breeze that I saw on Saturday down at Palmetto. So, as we shift from there going into the Pegasus Turf, it's a little bit more unknown. It's kind of Colonel Liam won it last year. looks to be the lock this year. He's going to be having a prep race, I believe, this weekend, if not next weekend, to get himself ready for that race. But there's a couple other horses that are going to be jumping in there. And one interesting that we are going to talk about, and it's a new situation, but a very good horse, is Masterpiece. Masterpiece was previously with Mike McCarthy, ran in the Breeders' Cup Turf, had won a grade 2 at Del Mar, and then ran second in a grade 2 to Hong Kong Harry, and is now joining the barn of Saffie Joseph, and will be arriving on Wednesday in Palmettos to prepare for the Pegasus Turf. So a lot of cool stuff going on in terms of that, and that race could actually be really interesting. Colonel Liam, obviously, people are going to think is the best horse, but I think you're going to see some other horses filter in there that might actually have a shot.
If you look at the simplification Papa Cap in the Pegasus World Cup, those are two horses that we always see kind of knocking heads with that grade 1 caliber field, and they're just maybe some bit of a wise guy play, but they just can never seem to get there. I'm interested in those two horses that you both mentioned, White Barrio, Cyberknife, more so because in their prior starts, they cut back to a mile. What does it mean from a handicapping standpoint or just a racehorse management standpoint, cutting them back and now going a little bit of added ground in the Pegasus coming up here in a couple of weeks? Is that a concern, cutting back, then stretching back out? Is it pretty standard? Where do you fall on that, Michael, in terms of what we might be able to deduce from that sort of move?
The mile is usually the toughest distance for a racehorse when you're talking about, especially on the dirt, in terms of what horses need to have physically. You need to have raw speed, and you need to be able to carry that speed further than sprinting and have enough stamina to last the mile. So actually, mile races can be really good tighteners to stretch out going to the mile and eighth. Now, we've seen it before, and people wanted to knock him most of the year. Life is Good. Everybody thought Life is Good was just a miler. Now, at Gulfstream, what we've seen, some horses with a lot of raw natural speed can stretch that mile and an eighth no problem and really handle horses at that distance. So when you cut back, when I look at a cut back to a mile and a half, you're cutting back to 6 furlongs and then or 7/8 and you're stretching back out. It's a little bit more, but a mile usually really tightens those screws down. So my guess is, Cyberknife had a hard campaign. He deserves a little bit of a breather. I don't know if Brad Cox will prep him before that race. My guess is he'll probably train him into it. White Barrio obviously ran in the Cigar Mile. He's going to train right up to the Pegasus. But looking at it that way, these horses probably were tightened the screws completely, and now you just maintain as you go forward. You're not trying to get them fitter. You're just trying to keep them on top of their game as you get them closer. And you might do a little bit more as you get close to the race, maybe a couple longer works or a couple faster works with good gallop outs to keep them tight. But the mile race is usually always something that horses, especially two horses like that. I mean, White Barrio, he wants to be forwardly placed, and Cyberknife typically wants to be in a stalking position and closer up. It does well for him. So that's kind of what I see in those two horses in this race going forward.
And for the handicapping side, the easiest thing you'll see handicappers do it. The horse is running a mile distance, right? And then he comes flying late for 3rd or 4th. And they're like, oh man, he just has to have a mile and 16th, mile and 8th. He's going to win at that. But let's say that horse has actually been winning at a mile, and this maybe he's in a patch where he's just not firing this, but he wins at a mile. I think that's the easiest thing to do, and it's not a handicapping angle I like. Just because he's coming in late, passing horses doesn't mean at a distance is the answer for that horse to win, and vice versa. If he's on the lead, has a lead till, almost to the end, wiring him in a mile. Oh, he needs 6 furlongs, 5.5 furlong, maybe. He said, no, if that horse is 1 at a mile and the horse is, maybe it's just off. It's easy to do. And I think it's an easy angle to look at on paper to see, oh, this horse was flying late. Oh, now it's at a mile and 8. This is the spot for it. This is it. So I think it's actually a bad angle people take sometimes. They overuse it to just when you see a horse finishing or fading and then thinking shortening up or adding distance is the answer. I kind of disagree on changing the whole race type as the answer. I just think a horse, what that horse wins at, generally keep, maybe like Michael is saying, kind of almost a prep, kind of keeping them tight. You said running a mile, and then now we get them ready for that mile, the longer distance, which he wins at. So I like it more of almost a prep rather than, hey, this is the way is going to win down the ride. So I'm more of a faded on adding distance or taking away distance on a horse on the handicapping side.
Well, and it's interesting. Something that you said, Mike, is I've seen it all the time with sprinters, and people get this wrong quite a bit. A horse that is running up close and then fades in a sprint race, and people say, he needs to cut back. Well, when you're looking at sprinters, and this can happen too when you're looking at milers, you have to have raw speed. Like when you have Flightline was a weird example last year, and Life is Good is a weird example as well. But when you have true two-turn dirt horses, those horses want to click along, maybe slightly sub 12s, but that's what they want to do. When you have horses in sprint races with raw speed, they're at top gear and they still have a fifth gear to shift to go. So sometimes what I've seen a lot, and I've spoken to a lot of individuals about it, my horse is sprinting and they left him. Maybe I need to cut him back to 5/8. It's like, no. Stretch this horse out. This horse does not have a fifth gear. He's got gears 1 through 4, but he does not have that fifth gear at the sprint distance. When you cut him back and that horse is traveling comfortably in the bridle, tugging the rider, now when you ask him to shift and veer out and go, he'll have that gear. But you had that horse use himself too much too early because it's not his natural pace and cadence that he wants to travel at when he runs.
Exactly. And like you're saying, like the gear that you're talking about, mostly the jockeys try to say, like you said, when can they use that last bit? Some of them don't have it. Sometimes, like you said, the sprinting, that's their pace. But that's a good pace. And maybe it fades at a sprint distance, but the mile's it. It can maintain that because it's naturally faster than the others. And then doesn't have a fifth gear, but has that fourth gear that can get them home for the mile. Like you're saying, love it. Good stuff.
The Pegasus World Cup has kind of turned into, with the addition of the turf, they're trying to build it into a festival of racing, if you will. And I remember when they hatched this idea 5, 6, 7 years ago now at this point, they were talking about a $12 million purse, a $16 million purse, where they'd be sharing the TV rights deals money amongst all of the entrants. I think it's safe to say that that grand plan hasn't come to fruition at this point, and most likely never will. But in the overall racing calendar, where do you guys think the Pegasus kind of ranks? Obviously, the Triple Crown races are what we all look forward to at this level of racing. But where does the Pegasus fall, in your opinion, in the overall scope of exciting events, meaningful events from a handicapping standpoint and a horsemanship standpoint? Where does a victory in this race, or the turf for that matter, kind of place horses moving forward into the year ahead?
I think as far as the dirt division is concerned, and yes, at the beginning, it did have those massive purses. And then obviously trying to get these horses to stick around. I think really what happened was the Saudi Cup just killed it. And they said, well, we'll put up 20 million if that's what you guys are going to do, and we'll take all the damn horses anyways. So when you look at it with the dirt horses, it's really the last opportunity to run if you're going to breed that year. So you'll see certain horses stick around. Like we saw Gun Runner win this race. We've seen Arrogate win this race. We've seen Life is Good win this race. So as far as quality, and I don't think the quality this year is potentially as good as it has been. Yes, is it a deeper race? Sure. But I think what happened is you had horses campaign to peak for the Classic because the Classic had more money on the table than this race did. So, obviously you have certain horses, as Flightline's already standing in the breeding shed, and so is Life is Good. This could have been an easy, last start to take. it does take a little while for these boys to learn what they're supposed to do transitioning into their second career. So to teach them in 2 weeks how to transition from a hardcore athlete into a ladies' man sometimes takes a little bit more time, as the stallion farms will tell you. So some of these stallions are now retiring off the Breeders' Cup Classic. To me, in the pinnacle of racing, your Classic is still, after your Triple Crown, the elite race in America, and one of the elite dirt races internationally. Then your next step would probably be, and again, they're falling in a weird stage because they're just at the wrong time of year. I would say this race would probably rank just a little bit below the Breeders' Cup Classic. You're not crowning champions off of it. Before, the Dubai World Cup was a very big deal. The Saudi Cup now has more horses gearing towards it because there's more money. But the problem is, if you really want, and we don't necessarily give those two races enough weight, most of those horses that win the Saudi Cup now or the Dubai World Cup, people aren't looking to as stallion prospects. What they really want is they want to see a horse win the Whitney. They want to see a horse win the Breeders' Cup Classic. They want to see the horses win the races in America to merit their resume, to then retire to the breeding shed, which is, as we all know, that's where the real money is going to be made. So it's a phenomenal race. And I can tell you, Breeders' Cup, take note, here we have this year, Kygo and One Republic playing in concert after the race. Like, it's an awesome event. This is what racing should be. It should be a marquee event for us in the sport. So definitely the Breeders' Cup or the Pegasus Dirt is still a substantial race. Pegasus Turf is weird because turf season is ended. Your stragglers are kind of around. It's really the time of year you want to rest your best grass horses because you want them ready to fire come spring around Derby time, when we really start seeing these big Grade 1 races on the turf calendar come out. So, it'll be interesting over the years to see if, obviously we saw a huge shift in graded stakes standings recently. The Pegasus Turf comes up as a race that you might have one solid Grade 1 horse and a lot of Grade 2 horses. The dirt, different though.
Totally agree. And on the ranking of it, I'm right with you. It's like you said, they just kind of got trumped by the overseas money with the Saudi Cup. I mean, when they first came out, as you remember, their goal was, we're the largest purse in the world. That was their whole pitch was that we're going to be the biggest race in the world, cash. So they were getting the best horses in by money. Obviously, then other stuff happened, so they changed the purses. But like you said, the dirt has maintained quality winners over the time. And like you said, the reason I feel like there's 13 horses, because there's no big dog in there that really anyone's that afraid of. You know what I mean? Like, there's no, if life is good, if they wanted to retire on the Vegas Cup, you might have 6, 7 horses. They're going to we don't want to put our horse in to get whooped. So 13 horse field, I think, leads owners and trainers to think it's way more open this year. Maybe not that quality of the great there laying around like in the past, but it's still going to be a great race, maintains a good level of a Grade 1 quality. Obviously, I put it below the Breeders' Cup. For obviously after the Triple Crown and stuff, the Breeders' Cup, and it's the Pegasus to me. And like you said, the party atmosphere is a part of it. You're going south for the winter. It's it's warm time there. And they have the good. Last year they had some good music, and this year they're having good music again. Because after it ends this year at the Breeders' Cup, it was kind of I was stuck. I went this year. People wanted to still hang out. You could tell people were ready to still go after the Breeders' Cup. You just kind of leave. So maybe it'd be cool to have something else, like you're saying, maybe a concert after the Breeders' Cup. You could get the biggest star for the Breeders' Cup, So I like that with the Pegasus. More party, chill, still quality horses, but just kind of a good, more atmosphere type thing is where I put it at. Just on just a more fun atmosphere type for horse racing, I feel is the goal of it for a Pegasus.
As we mentioned earlier, Saffie Joseph having at least a couple of starters in there. Michael was able to catch up with him earlier this week for a couple of quick questions about how he feels like his horses are prepping for the Pegasus World Cup.
We have Saffie Joseph, who's down in Florida right now with his contingent that's getting ready for the Pegasus. Saffie, how's everything going down in Florida for you?
All's going well, Mike.
Awesome. So you've got a couple horses that you're pointing towards the Pegasus. First and foremost, White Ibarra ran a huge race last out. What have you seen in him coming out of the Cigar Mile as you're progressing towards this race? What have you kind of done in the interim between that last race and now?
Well, we're 2 weeks out from the last race. We haven't really done much just yet. But the reason for going to the Pegasus, he's 4 for 4 on the track, and it's his home track. So why not try the mile and an eighth, where he's won at a distance already in the Florida Derby, and it's good. It's perfect spacing that gives him a steady series of probably like 4 or 5 breezes to the race. So that's the thoughts behind it. A lot of the top horses have retired or had issues that they got in a break. So he's kind of crept his way back up to the ladder just by default in a way also.
Now, running in a mile race, going back to a mile on an eighth, do you think that's an advantage as a tightener to run in a mile to help prep for a mile on an eighth, or kind of how do you look at that as a prep race going into this one?
Well, I thought like cutback would really help him. Kind of as well as he ran his top numbers and all the figures. Was a bit puzzled to see why he didn't really kick in. I thought at the top of the lane he had a chance to finish it off, and he didn't. I mean, Mind Control obviously is a very hard horse to get by, and he's very gutsy. So maybe that was one of the reasons. But overall, you would think that the mile race would put a little more speed into him, which Gulfstream is always a good thing. It's a speed favor in track. Short run to the first bend. So I see a lot of positives from that race.
Now, coming out of the mile, and obviously we know he's a horse with a lot of speed. Is he the type of horse that you think you'll probably have forwardly placed?
Yeah, he's a horse I think runs best forwardly placed. You want him to be forwardly placed, and as I said, Gulfstream, it's kind of speed and short run to the first bend. You don't want to be too far back. You don't want to have to make up too much ground. So I think his running style is going to benefit him in that aspect.
Now, you've got another horse that just jumped on the scene, but had previous form when he was running in South America, O'Connor. So ran a huge race in the allowance last out. What kind of have you seen from that horse, from that race, and what have you seen since you've had him in the barn?
Yeah, his first start in America was very impressive. He obviously came over with a resume from Chile. Yeah, he was one of the horses of the year over there, but he had to come and prove it against better quality horses over here. And his first start went as good as you could ask it to go. I was a little concerned distance-wise, a mile and 16. It's a bit on the short side for him. He's more like a mile and an eighth, mile and a quarter horse. And he definitely got a fast pace to running, which benefited him, but he won as visually as well as a horse could win a race. And since then has trained extremely well. I mean, trained pretty good going into the race, his last 4 or 5 works, but even from then on, he went up a notch. So he has to run in a Harlan's Holiday first at the end of the month, and hopefully he can pass that test. But feel like if he does pass that test and all goes well to the Pegasus, he's a very deserving horse to take a shot with.
And how do you see kind of, obviously, the other day, Noms went for the Harlan's Holiday. They're not out yet. Do you know kind of what horses might be showing up in that race that you might be facing with him?
I mean, I know simplification. I think Art Collector might be in there, but we don't really know exactly who's going to run yet till the noms come out. But I think if he can, basically, Skippy Longstockings, our other horse, is going to be there also. But feel like if O'Connor all goes well and he shows up and runs that kind of race, he's going to be a tough horse to beat in that race, no matter who basically shows up.
Now, seeing Skippy, and you mentioned another horse who obviously ran third in the Belmont with and then won the West Virginia Derby with. Is he a horse you're considering the Pegasus with, or just the previous 2 we discussed?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely, if he gets a shot to get there, he has a chance in the Harlan's Holiday also, Skippy. He's won a mile and eighth at Gulfstream already. Obviously, very hard trying horse, overachiever. Pennsylvania won the West Virginia Derby, and then last time out in the Pennsylvania Derby, thought he ran a bit flat, so we give him a freshening from then on. He's trained well and coming into the race also. He's had a good steady series of works, and he's entitled to run well in the Harlan's Holiday. If he was to run top 3, you would want to say that he would get an invitation to give him a chance in the Pegasus.
So it looked to me that he had a pretty good work over the weekend. What do you think of that work from him? And will you probably work him one more time going into the Harlan's Holiday?
Yeah, he had a very good work. He went 5/8 with Music City Dancer, who's Philly just got reclaimed, and you help acquire, and she's gonna go on to a stake also on Harlan's Holiday. So it was a good work for Skippy, and he's gonna have one more work come out with an easy half probably next week, and all being well, he should be ready, set to go.
Now you have, which might not be public knowledge yet, but you've got a new shooter coming in that you're looking at the Pegasus Turf with. You mind talking about that horse a little bit and what got you excited to try and bring him into your barn?
Yeah, masterpiece. He came around with Mike Iveron. He ended up buying him. We put together a group partnership that he's obviously majority owner, and he's actually shipping out he shipped out yesterday from California. He's going to take a couple days to arrive here. We couldn't get planes at this time of the year, so we didn't want to take the chance and keep him too long over there. He's masterpiece, a very good horse in his own right. Had a good campaign with Michael McCarthy, and he's a horse we're very happy to get into the barn. I mean, he hasn't arrived yet, but all going well. He's a horse that's 2 for 2 at a distance, the Pegasus distance, 1.8 miles on the grass, and you would like to think that he should have a chance in that kind of race.
So be it that a lot of his success in the U.S. has come in California, do you feel that California racing, in terms of how the turf course is and how it's maintained, that it represents and is a little bit more formal transfer to Florida and Gulfstream?
You would like to hope so. I mean, California, obviously, turf courses are faster and firmer, and that's what Gulfstream turf course is faster, firmer turf course. So you would like to hope that he's a horse that would run as well as in California as he did here. And if he does, he's obviously got a class to compete in one of those races. And if it falls right in the right way, he could upset those kind of races.
And what would be your process? You get a horse like that. Obviously, he's proven. Last start was in the Breeders' Cup Turf. He's coming to you. When you get a horse like that in the barn, what's kind of your process getting him from what you have and then getting him to where you'd like him to be? Do you give him a little downtime, let him settle in? But what does that process kind of look like?
I mean, he's coming to us with good spacing from the Breeders' Cup. He's had a couple of works over there with Michael McCarthy. So it looks like he was nominated to run in a stake at Santa Anita at the end of the month. So once he comes in all well, you just basically, you hope he could run as well for us as he ran for him. I mean, if he runs some of the races that he's run for Michael McCarthy, he's a horse already on the form that's going to fit quite well into the Pegasus. So you just hope he runs as well. And maybe if he does like Gulfstream, just those kind of horses, the turf trips, they're not much difference that separates the top ones from the 4th or 5th one. You need to get the right kind of strip, and anything could happen basically.
Now, Pegasus is obviously, the Gulfstream Championship meet kicks off, late December. Last year, you won the training title. You also knocked Todd Pletcher off the perch in the Florida Derby. He's won that quite a bit. How's your stable shaping up for the championship meet? And are you thinking you might be able to replicate what you did last year?
I mean, we're very thankful how last year went, and coming into this meet, obviously Todd's he's the icon of Gulfstream. He's won it 18 times before last year, so he's going to come back tougher than ever. We think we got a good stable. Can we win it? I don't know. It's hard to say until you get the meet started. It's a shorter meet this year, so that kind of plays into momentum more of who gets off to a faster start. But we're very thankful for the horses we got behind us. We think we got a lot of quality, and we got some numbers too that we definitely are. If all goes well and we have a good meet to get into a good rhythm, we're definitely gonna be competitive. As far as who wins it, I don't know. It'll be easier to say that after the first.
Yeah, no, well, awesome. Well, best of luck in the upcoming meet, and we'll keep checking in on some of your runners as they continue to progress towards the races. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate it, Saffie.
All right, Mike. Thank you. Take care.
You too.
The day after Christmas, always opening day at Santa Anita. Horse player holiday, if you will. Most handicappers look forward to that. 6 graded stakes on the card. Michael, you used to train out west. I'm interested to hear a little bit of your perspective on that December 26th opening day, Santa Anita. What's the atmosphere there like? Why is that such an important day for West Coast racing?
Obviously, opening day at Santa Anita is phenomenal. Now we have the meets. They circulate a little bit differently. Before you used to have the Oak Tree meeting, and then it would lead into, the grand opening of Santa Anita on December 26th. Now they go to Del Mar, which is even better when you show up on the 26th of Santa Anita, but it's awesome. I mean, I remember I'm from Davis, California, born and raised. So there would be times where I'd say, hey, Dad, let's go to opening day at Santa Anita. Now, for people who know where Davis is, that's near Sacramento. So that's a 6.5 hour drive to get down there. So we'd get up at 6, get in the car, and we'd get there before, the races would start, or miss a couple races on the card. But it's a phenomenal day of racing, typically, and specifically the Malibu. And it's a race, funny enough, that a lot of people forget over the years in the calendar. You have 3 races at Santa Anita on December 26th that are the last Grade 1 races for 3-year-olds to run it. Number 1 would be the Malibu, 7 furlongs on the dirt for the boys. Number 2 would be the La Cañada, and that's the La Brea, sorry. We have so many La Cañada, La Brea, different. So the La Brea is 7 furlongs for fillies, Grade 1 on the dirt. And then after that, you have the American Oaks, which used to be run at Hollywood Park. It's now part of Santa Anita. It's Grade 1 for 3-year-old fillies, 2 turns on the grass. So when you do that, the other big race, and California racing shifted a lot over the years. The San Antonio, which was a major prep for what was the Santa Anita Handicap, is on opening day as well. So you'd usually see your top 3-year-olds make one more bow as they'd go out of the year and get ready for their next season as older horses. But then you'd see your older horses emerge, and a couple of them emerge with the big circle on the calendar of the Santa Anita Handicap. So it was always an awesome day of racing. Now they have the Mathis Mile included in there, and then they also have the San Gabriel included in there, 2 graded stakes races on the turf. And so going forward, obviously, the Mathis Mile is graded stakes for 3-year-olds. It is not a Grade 1, so it doesn't fall into that category of last Grade 1 race of the year, but it is another time for these boys going a mile in the grass to get a shot before they have to start facing olders. And then the San Gabriel, again, it's a part of the great racing calendar in California for 2-turn grass horses. So it's a fun day where you'd see stars. And I remember in years past going and just, look, hell, I won't go on too long, but let me give you a list of names of horses that have actually won the Malibu. So if you go back, Flightline, Charlatan, Omaha Beach, City of Lights, McKinsey, Run Happy, Jimmy Creed, The Factor. And what a lot of people don't realize, there was a horse in that race that I'd worked with before he retired. It was his last start before he started his illustrious stud career at $5,000. That was a horse called Into Mischief. So Into Mischief ran second. So this is a race that a lot of people might not think of as a stallion-making race, like people peg the Met Mile. But there are a lot of, as you can see from this list, a lot of good now stallions running in the Malibu for the last time as 3-year-olds. So I love it. You go, there's mariachi band coming through as you come through the gates at Santa Anita. It's one of the most beautiful racetracks in the country. Some days you'll get snow in the Sierra Madre Mountains on the backdrop while it's still 70 degrees out, and you can be enjoying yourself at Santa Anita. So it's a phenomenal day of racing overall.
Heck yeah. And I like it. Just like you said, it usually has those graded stakes races before the end of the year, which, like you said, you usually get some high quality winners out of that Malibu. The turf race is always good. The turf racing's been terrible all over the country. At least the West Coast still has good turf tracks. One thing they're doing right. I'm also excited to see, I think this is the second year of Santa Anita doing the ship and win also. So hopefully larger fields start coming, so hopefully people take advantage of that. If you're out of state, you might as well give your horse a shot with their ship and win program for Santa Anita. So I'm looking to see if they get the large field size. I know that's been a point they're trying to fix, is add the field sizes. So I'm excited to see if they can, get that dialed in. And I always like opening day. I'm a West Coast guy, Portland, Oregon. Never been to Santa Anita, but we'll get there. But I love West Coast racing, mainly like you're saying, the turf. They have the 2-turn turf racing. And all this year has been. I love turf racing. It's been a disaster as a fan and the sport. There's not a lot of it. It's been absolutely atrocious. So got some great turf racing in. Good field sizes are dialed up this weekend. Plenty of stuff to fire your Christmas money on there in Santa Anita, day after Christmas. That's why everyone probably likes it. presents are done. Adult time now, a little bit. Get out there, enjoy it, get to yourself, fire on those ponies, and it should be some good racing this year. And like Michael said, you just never know who's going to come out of it. And there's been some greats, and something like the End of the Mischief. Started at 5,000. I mean, who you look at a program, End of Mischief's almost seems like in every horse.
Pretty much, right? I mean, and what's interesting is it's actually, the only race I'd probably look at and say, hey, look, we'd love to see something better in there, is the La Brea. And I think that was one of the races that was downgraded recently. There's been a lot of great fillies in the past. Indian Blessing ran in that race. Spain ran in that race. It doesn't attract the same caliber of fillies as it used to. But I mean, looking at it this year, the Malibu has, I'm trying to remember how many noms. I think there's 14 noms, but the two main horses, which is why you will not see him in the Pegasus, is Taiba and the other one's Messier. Those two horses, from what I'm hearing, they're using that race as their shutdown race for the season as 3-year-olds, pointing towards the Saudi Cup. And that will be where they will debut at 4. So they're going to skip the Pegasus for the $20 million, which is interesting. And if you do this on Equibase and you go leading trainer in the country, you'll see, I'm trying to think who's leading in money. It's Chad Brown, I believe, and followed by Pletcher. But then if you add in Saudi Cup earnings, Baffert catapults into a whole nother division. So Bob's a smart man. Bob is incredibly intelligent. I worked with him. He said people remember only 2 things every year: who won the Derby and who won the Breeders' Cup Classic. He's also an individual who says, hell, if I can have good 3-year-olds go and take down a $20 million purse next season, why not? So he's the type that's going to skip races like the Pegasus, instead focus on larger purses of the $20 million Saudi Cup and the $10 million Dubai World Cup instead. So then segueing into another race on the card, obviously, as we're talking about the San Antonio, he has his former Saudi Cup winner. He's going to be running in there from what it sounds like. Country Grammar will be making his start in there with Defunded. Now, Defunded might use that race as a prep race to then go to the Pegasus. So he might be another shooter that falls in that category. But, I mean, even when you get into the San Gabriel, you've got Hit the Road, who won it previously. And then you also have Hong Kong Harry. Actually, Hit the Road didn't win that race. Sorry about that. But Hit the Road, Hong Kong Harry, Master of Hounds. So deep fields all around, but kind of a fun day because it's setting up to see who's going to be running and who's going to be doing well, potentially Saudi Cup going into the 4-year-old year, knowing what Baffert's sitting on with the 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds he's going to be running in those races.
Rennie, from a handicapping perspective on these big days where there's multiple graded stakes races, where we're seeing those more and more all across the country. Personally, as a fan of the sport, I love that concept. Does your approach to handicapping the day of races change when there's 5 or 6 graded stakes races on a card as compared to just a single grade 3 race at the end of a random Saturday? Do you change your approach? Do you change your bankroll management, your wagering strategy going into an opening day at Santa Anita on the 26th, for example?
Yeah, I definitely, because one of the main reasons, the pools will be significantly higher than normal at Santa Anita. The day after Christmas, opening day, their pools are going to be bigger. So you have more opportunity to make something off, maybe not using as much money also. So your bankroll could stay the same. Always stay within yourself when don't overdo it. If you want to take a stab, do it, but stay within your own self is what I always preach. You know what I mean? So, but the pools will be big enough that you can almost use less, take more of a stand and still get rewarded. You don't have to overcompensate, run it like 10 to 20 times, pick 4 because you're worried about a pool, not being as big. And I think with great, you'll probably have like an all turfs, all graded pick 4, pick 5s they usually do, those are always interesting because more often than not on the big dog days, those horses are just tough to beat. It's on paper, good luck. You know what I mean? You need stuff to happen. You need someone to get stuck in the gate. Golden Pal to get stuck in the gate. stuff like that. Like little things happen to create a long shot. If Golden Pal breaks, that horse that wired him wouldn't wire him. A closer's going to get him because Golden Pal's going to push the long shot that Tyler won on in the Breeders' Cup. So pace dependent always can change stuff. So I think something usually freakish happens to make some of these horses lose. But no, field sizes are always bigger generally, so it helps out. But I think it's usually tougher. Most of the time, almost chalks out more than not because they're just these horses they're grade 1 horses for a reason. Some of them are just really tough to beat and pushing to this spot. So at bankroll management, you can maybe spend a little more, but I keep your bets types the same. This is what I always like to do. Don't change your style because of something or not, unless you really have an opinion. That's what you're going for. Always, I'm never going to talk someone off a price horse or not or anything. If that's your horse, go for it. Stay within your means. But yeah, no, it's fun. It's more like kind of what we're doing the show. You like to see these big named horses run. They're all the big name trainers, the big name horses you haven't seen in 3 or 4 months. So stuff we can do within this show, like we're talking about, is to keep these horses fresh on your mind. So then a little bit more coming up to these races when you have the all stakes, pick 4, pick 5s. We'll provide you with a little more info. But betting wise, no, I just think generally, and most people say it chalks out more than not, just because the horses are who they are.
Well, and the one thing that you can depend on a little bit more at a track like Santa Anita is those horses are home, right? So, in races where you're like in Saratoga or you might be in Gulfstream, you'll have horses shipping in from different places. They might not be training on the same tracks. California is very much a circuit where the horses all move to the same circuit. So sometimes during the Del Mar Fall Meet, they'll still stay at Santa Anita, train at Santa Anita, and ship to Del Mar to run and shuttle back. But typically, these horses all follow the exact same circuit. So most of these horses you're seeing, and there's very few shippers that were nominated in any of these races. They're mainly all California horses. So it's a little bit more dependable because they're home. They're in their routine. They're consistent. Stuff can still happen. Stuff can still come up. The one thing you'll see in California typically is the good dirt horses stay good. There's other horses within the California calendar. If you follow California racing a lot, there will be certain horses that peak at certain times of the year and consistently do so. None of those horses are in these dirt races in this go around, but as far as what Mike's saying in terms of making money, the one thing in California that you can count on is tight finishes in grass races. The turns are tight at Santa Anita. You can get stuck on the fence really easily and things can happen. So if you're looking for opportunities in California, it'll usually come in the form of grass. Dirt racing, its best horse is usually best horse on the day. So
it's a fact. Michael's dead on with that. The California dirt horses, and just look who's won the Malibu. I mean, those horses are, they're no joke, who's come out of the Malibu. So you're dead on. The turf just creates that little more, tighter corners. And, turf is just creates generally, I feel almost, I don't know if it's a stat, but more prices maybe visually on bigger stakes days just because of so I feel like a lot more can go wrong in a turf race. Seeing maybe the dirt, am I right or wrong about that? Or does it just seem like that visually?
No, you're 100%
Okay.
right. Never worried when I ran a dirt horse. I'm like, I'm fit, I'm ready. I'm going to clown this field. Grass like crap. I got stuck. We got boxed in. We couldn't get out. We didn't get the run we needed. Dirt, there's plenty of room. You just kind of bruise them around and knock them around and make your own hole and go.
Good info.
Michael, you shared some Baffert wisdom when relaying that quote that he gave you, saying that we only really remember 2 horses every year, the winner of the Breeders' Cup Classic and the winner of the Kentucky Derby. And, as the calendar changes here in the next couple of weeks, that's where, if it's not already, most of the focus will turn from a handicapping and just, fans of the sport in general. That's where the focus is going to turn to the Kentucky Derby. There are Kentucky Derby future pools already out there, which seems a little crazy to be backing some horses this far out with, as we all know, how much good and bad can happen between now and May. So, Rennie, Does that pique your interest this far out? Any of these Kentucky Derby future pools? Do you throw some money in there just to kind of cross your fingers and hope? What's your sentiment around those? 5-6 months away.
I'm an anti Derby future just because they're it's so far out from right now. And right now is aggressive. So I mean, these guys, and I saw the list and I looked at the betting, the lowest prices. They're terrible odds, but it's just names. The trainers of the top 6 horses, it's Baffert, Pletcher, Cox, and Asmussen. And then Delgado actually has out of nowhere, Delgado has a horse.
New York Thunder.
No, a different one.
Different
Awesome
one.
something. Awesome.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah. But I was shocked that it was that high. It was 5th in between Cox, Baffert's 3 or 4. So that surprised me, just Delgado. That's the only name. And then Saffie. So I think it's based when the guys make the odds, they take the big boy trainers who, it's kind of just putting it in and knowing that people are going to bet on it. So they're you're making a bad bet to me, unless you're the inside and even if you own a horse, Miley, you could probably attest this. I mean, something can happen. If you bet on a horse now
100%.
winning the Derby, I mean, shit, even if you know the horse is going to win, it's just so far. So I'm anti-Derby futures. It's a cool thing. Yeah, you this horse is my favorite name or something, and you're at Vegas. You want to do something fun with it. But no, as an actual, I've talked to some serious handicappers, and generally they all kind of say it. I mean, it's just so far away. And if you play horses, you just know what more goes wrong than right. Am I correct there, Michael?
100%. I mean, literally the Derby, I have people and John and I did a show with John Stetton about Derby horses, I think 4 days before the Derby. And I did another show with ABR 3 days before the Derby. To make your Derby decisions accurately, you need to make them morning up. You need to understand what's going on the backside, which horses are doing well, which horses are not doing well, which horses scratched in late, right? So, I mean,
Rich Strike.
Look at last year, right? Rich Strike. And then I can tell you, I've worked with several Derby horses. One that we thought was a lock several weeks out was Pioneer the Nile. And Mind That Bird, who was another horse I had worked with, beat him. Now, if you'd asked me at the end of the 2-year-old year, I'd worked with Mind That Bird at Richard Mandela's. Richard had bought him from Canada because the Breeders' Cup was at Santa Anita on a synthetic track. He was shipped down. I remember going and trying to get this horse off the trailer. I was told we've got a big Breeders' Cup juvenile. Okay. And I go to this trailer and they drop the hatch and they said, "Here's the horse." I said, "That's not the horse." And they said, "What do you mean? This is the horse." I said, "This is not the horse." Richard said, "Big Breeders' Cup juvenile horse." I said, "This is a pony. Who is this?" And they said, "This is your horse. This is Mind That Bird. He just shipped in from Canada." So if you told me after that horse, I believe he ran 10th in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile that year, that horse would have beat Pioneer the Nile, I would have told you you're freaking crazy. So, I mean, it's literally a race. I've seen situations too, and we're talking Derby, which is anything can happen, anything can go, a lot of things can go wrong. But I mean, I've seen it before, and I'll give you one other quick story. Again, going back to Baffert when I worked for Bob. We had a horse before he debuted. Baffert said, "I'm winning the Breeders' Cup Juvenile with this horse." And I said, "We haven't even run him." But I mean, the horse was good. And the horse breezed really well, did everything perfect. But he ran second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He got beat a nose. He wasn't far off. He got beat a nose. That was looking at lucky. So even in that, you never know. And that's a race where you're trying, if you've got a substantial freak, and looking at lucky, obviously, champion 2-year-old won the Preakness. I think he was champion 3-year-old as well. So it's a race where you literally have to go morning of and say, if you can walk around the backside and look in stalls, that's going to give you your best bet, but not this far out.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And I just think they totally gear, like I was saying, they just put the big names up there. And like you said, not all, Asmussen's never won a Derby. So, you want to make that bet on one of his horses now? The guy is one of the greatest trainers ever. and never won a Derby. So good luck putting your money. I honestly, no offense to him, I just paid his horses in the Derby because he's never won it. And you've had enough times. You're at that threshold of where you've had opportunities. Maybe it's just the style of how you train, or just get unlucky, like you said. But
and Asmussen, if you really wanted, and hell, we're going in the weeds here, and I know we're trying to keep the show concise.
Okay.
Asmussen's very good with 2-year-olds. Asmussen's very good at getting those 3-year-olds on the trail. Okay. He's not very good at finishing it off in the big races, but then he excels getting those 3-year-olds back ready in the summer and peaking at the Breeders' Cup Classic. That's what he does consistently. You've got a freak in Curlin. He won the Preakness with Curlin. He ran second in the Belmont to Rags to Riches. I think Curlin ran third in the Derby. So, and that's probably his best Derby horse ever, in my opinion. So understanding that, and anything can happen. I remember seeing, there was a horse when I was at Santa Anita. Jim, you mentioned my brief training stint in California. I was walking to the track one day. I was riding my pony, and I saw this bay horse with no markings. Gorgeous horse. Absolutely gorgeous. And I called Dominique, my wife, and I said, you need to run to this track. I don't know who the hell this thing is, but Baffert's got something that looks like a freak. And he hadn't even galloped yet. Just the way he looked, just the way he was built, just the way he traveled. I said, this horse is something else. And I asked the rider, I said, who is this horse? And he said, Life is Good. And but he chuckled. And I'm like, no. I know Life is Good t-shirts. So I'm like, who the hell is he? Stop screwing with me. Life is Good. So, that horse didn't make the Derby. Charlatan didn't make the Derby. And luckily Baffert had Authentic sitting in the wings, and COVID pushed it back, and right time, right scenario. But, even Baffert with his best horses, to me, Cave Rock's probably his better 2-year-old. National Treasure looks like the horse who'll come to his own at 3. He's got these Zidane horses that are coming into their own, breaking their maidens now. Even when you have the 8 to 10 Derby horses, they shuffle. One gets hurt at the wrong time, next one slots in. So it's all about timing. And I could tell you one thing, and I've spoken to Spendthrift about it, but I saw the horse in person. When Authentic was in the spring of his 3-year-old year, actually winter, right? It was right around this time that we're talking about. I saw Authentic 2 weeks into the meets at Santa Anita. It was one of the early Derby preps. That horse, if that Derby was not moved to September, would not have won the Kentucky Derby. He was just so immature. Yeah, he was so immature and so lanky, and he just needed time to fill out his frame. And luckily, once it got pushed back, he turned into the horse that he was. So all of these horses, and that's the thing, most of these great horses are stacked in those barns, Baffert, Cox, and Fletcher. So as you see it shuffle out through the season, you'll see different horses pop up and move in and move out.
Yep.
Awesome Strong is that Delgado horse.
That was, yeah.
One thing you could make an argument this far out, looking at it right now. If you think a horse like Cave Rock, obviously you'd be rolling the dice that they're going to get into the starting gate for the Kentucky Derby. And right now at 20 to 1 in the future pool, you could make an argument that if Cave Rock is in the starting gate, there's no way he's going to be as high as 20 to 1. So you're getting a little bit of value thinking about it and justifying it that way, but still, 5-6 months away, you're rolling a heavy set of dice. Yeah. But if you're looking to get into this pool, Michael, I'll throw this one to you from just looking for some action standpoint. Is there perhaps a pedigree angle that somebody might want to look at to, throw a couple dollars in here and, hopefully give themselves something to root for over the next 5-6 months?
I think a lot of it, to me, pedigree does come into play. Bigger that comes into play is what that athlete looks like. So I remember every year when I was really young, really trying to understand this game, I would print out every nomination of all the Derby horses and go through them top to bottom and their PPs just to kind of learn and understand, what these guys were doing and why. You need to consider as you go forward, are there certain sires that are later maturing nowadays? Not very many anymore. Most of our stallions that stand at stud are precocious, were precocious, and produce precocious horses. You're literally looking for a horse that might, with more time, find himself. But one horse, actually, interestingly enough, who I thought could not get beat in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He did not run in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and he is by a later maturing sire, would be Loggins. Okay, so Ghost Sapper was not very early, not very precocious, doesn't produce precocious horses. And here was something, and I saw him as a yearling at the Saratoga Select Sale. He was a beast then. He was a beast as a 2-year-old. Barely got beat by Forte after getting knocked around the rail and still fought on. That would be one horse I'd look at. The other ones you'd want to maybe keep tabs on if you're going pedigree angle, because the only later maturing sire around at the moment would probably be Arrogant. Obviously, as we're talking Cave Rock. Cave Rock's smaller, though. So the question is, does Cave Rock hit a huge growth spurt going into his 3-year-old year and catch up? Or was he just fast and precocious when he was young? And now, as everybody matures, is he still in that mix? Probably super talented horse either way, but a horse, and here's the thing. I thought Forte, and Jim, we did a quick interview after the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Forte is bigger, lankier, looks like he wants to be a 3-year-old. That's kind of what he's built to do. So what he did at 2 is quite impressive, looking at what he probably wants to do at 3. Now, here's one of my asterisk points on that horse. I love Todd. I think he's one of the best trainers you could ever find. Todd is one of the best trainers as well as winning all the preps and having the best horse for the Derby and coming up on empty. So that is one thing that we need to understand is you can go through Todd's record until last year, where Saffie Joseph knocked him off for not only the training title, but the Florida Derby winner. How many Florida Derbies has Fletcher won coming in with a horse that looked like should be on top, and the horse doesn't show up? So that's kind of the thing that I feel with a horse like him. I like him a lot. He is that build. He is that physique. So going forward, he is a horse you need to keep an eye on. That's just something I keep in the back of my mind of I know the stats on how many horses Todd has run in the Derby and how many have broken through. And the funny thing when you think about it, the ones that broke through, maybe Always Dreaming you could make a case for, they were never his now horse. Super Saver was not the now horse when he ran. Exactly. It was always one of his, one of the other ones in the string of horses that he ran in the Derby.
And real quick on your point on the body style, that has to mean, like you said, pedigree, like you said, K-Rock's a little small, maybe will he go to that? The other horse, a little langy, you kind of can come into it, kind of is a horse. You know how it is. I played sports my whole life, played college football. You had the kid that was full grown, it had a mustache in, 4th and 5th grade. That kid never grew again. He peaked. That was it. There's your 2-year-old, dominant 2-year-old. Can he progress? And that's why I think the Derby futures are very difficult. How much bigger? You'll see a horse, like you said, you haven't seen him since the Breeders' Cup. Come to a 3-year-old, you're like, whoa, hey, he grew. You're huge now, So much goes in. That's why I'm kind of against futures, just kind of what Michael's saying, because of the growth of the horse is so dramatic during that time. From now to May is a lot of time for growth. So.
Well, and this is one thing that's not known throughout the industry, at least if you're not in it, right? So with these 2-year-olds, what's so interesting is we prep them to get ready as 2-year-olds. And what I always noticed was whenever I gave a 2-year-old a break, they hit a massive growth spurt. Now, did they still grow if we kept them? And I'm not saying break like I turned them out and brought them back in. I'm talking a break from racing. So as you get these horses and you gear them down coming out of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and you give them that 30, 60, 90 days, they'll hit big growth spurts in that time. And then as they come back going into that 3-year-old season, they're very different horses. So, you'll see huge changes amongst these horses. And again, the Derby is on the day. I mean, this is the difference with our sport when you compare it to professional sports. Professional sports, they're already fully grown athletes. Most of them, maybe your first year college guys still have some growing and build and bulk to build up on. But so you can kind of, as long as you can stay injury free and injury management or load management, what we want to call it in professional sports, you can kind of gear your team to peak on the day, get through the playoffs, as we're seeing, hopefully with the Warriors, save it until you need it.
Yeah.
In our sport, it's different. They're going to grow. They're going to hit different things. There's 100 things that can go wrong as you get these horses. There's missed training. There's wet tracks. There's days that you just don't intend for. And this is why, and some people might not understand why Baffert's so good at getting horses to win the Derby. And there's 2 reasons. One, he's extremely sharp at judging how to peak a horse. I mean, I've been around guys who I've worked for 4 Hall of Fame trainers. Okay. Baffert is he is the only one that could say, we have a race on this date. This is how we're going to feed the horse over the next 2 weeks. This is how we are going to change it for those final 2 weeks. And this is how we're going to adjust the training so that horse is 100% on that day. He's that good. Now, here's the other benefit that people don't take into account. California doesn't rain that often in Southern California. You don't miss training days. You don't miss works. You don't miss preps. You're very consistent as you come along. On the East Coast, and it was the biggest transition for me as a horseman when I started training in New York, you literally had to train by the calendar. You'd look up 5 days in advance and say, oh gosh, we have a thunderstorm coming through. I need to breeze today. Okay. And then you change your training schedules multiple times, or one of your preps comes up a sloppy track and you don't get out of the prep what you hoped you would have gotten out of it. So he's very good at peaking because he's got consistency that he can consistently count on, versus a lot of these other guys. There's going to be things that are going to go wrong just because of virtue of weather. And then what happens in inclement weather, pulled shoes, grab quarters, bowed tendons, all sorts of stuff running on sloppy track. So it's really tough at this stage. So, did I bet 10 grand on Cave Rock because, I'd like to be able to go buy a 2-year-old in the spring? Yeah, I didn't. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not that bold. Anyway.
Good stuff. Love it. Good stuff.
All right. Well, the first episode of many more to come of Riders Up is in the books, guys.
Well, guys, it's awesome to be doing this show with the 2 of you. I hope all of you who are watching it, look, we're going to be as interactive as possible. So if you have questions about things we cover on the show or topics you want us to go into on future shows, DM us, tweet at us with your question. We're going to try as we go into future shows to pick a couple questions that we're going to answer for you. And then, if we're good enough, and I'm sure Jim probably is with graphics, maybe you'll see your name and your handle on the show. We'll answer your question and we'll just go from there. So hope you guys enjoy the content. If you have any other things you want to discuss with us or things you want to learn, look, where we all are on Twitter, hopefully. If you don't, then maybe you can find us. So yeah, just great to get started.
Heck yeah, good stuff. It's been great chopping it up with you too. And like we're saying to everyone else, we're here to keep you up to beat on the horses that you don't hear about, the big names, the horses that vanished for 3 or 4 months, the grade 1 horses that'll be popping up here. We're going to keep you up to date on that, give you info, stuff you want to hear. Behind the scenes info from Michael, got all the info, knows everyone. I'll do my best capping wise, keeping you updated, keeping it fresh, and getting some winners out there. But it's more or less, we want to be interactive and just keep it fresh for everyone and just have fun with it.
Yeah. Like this video, subscribe on YouTube, tweets, retweets, the whole thing. We'll get your questions out there. We'll answer them to the best of our ability. Insider information, behind the scenes access, all coming your way over the next couple of weeks. And we will see you guys next time.